Victor Wembanyama just made history. The 5-for-5 game in the NBA is famous for its rarity, putting up at least 5 in every major statistical category: points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. This had not happened since 2019. It's only happened a handful of times in the history of the league, and Victor Wembanyama is making it look normal. He just put up the 15th ever 5-by-5 game in the history of the league, the first since, as I said, 2019. He's only the second rookie ever to have a 5-by-5 game. He's the second player ever to have 5 blocks and 5 steals in 2 straight games. And he's the first player in the history of the league to ever average a 5-by-5 over a 2-game stretch. 27 points, 10 boards, 8 assists, 5 blocks, and 5 steals. And the only reason that he didn't have the first ever back-to-back 5-by-5 performance is because he missed it by 1 assist in the previous game. The steals and the blocks, which typically are by far the hardest thing to get, were not even what was holding him back in the previous game. And it's not just that. It's not just that he accomplished it, that it's incredibly rare, that he's only the second rookie ever to do it, that it hasn't happened since 2019, but also he's the youngest player ever to record this statistical feat. And more impressively, he did it in the fewest amount of minutes that anyone ever has. And that has been the theme of Victor Wembanyama's rookie season so far from a statistical perspective. It's his incredible impact in what for most players would be limited minutes. For obvious reasons, the San Antonio Spurs have been very careful about how much they play Wemby, but it hasn't impacted his statistical production at all. When you look at his per game stats, it looks like a guy that's playing 35, 36 minutes a night, and he's just not. They want to make sure that he stays healthy. They want to make sure that he acclimates well to the NBA game. And quite frankly, they don't really need him to play a ton this year because, as they did in this game, they're not going to be winning a ton. And that's something that Wemby pointed out after the game in a little bit of frustration. Obviously excited about the statistical accomplishment and the history that goes along with it. I mean, having 5 blocks and 5 steals in 2 straight games, he's only the second player ever to do that, and Michael Jordan is the other player. So, like, it's okay for him to be excited about that statistical output, but he's just upset that they weren't winning the game. And that is going to be something that San Antonio is going to have to continue to contend with over the next couple of seasons as they really fully go into the Wemby era. We've talked about this in recent videos about how everything kind of changed for Victor Wembanyama this season when San Antonio started putting him at the 5 full time. Because prior to that point, they were pairing him with another big a lot of times it was Zach Collins, and they wanted him to be a little bit more of a perimeter presence. They wanted him to be able to roam a lot defensively, and his move to the 5 has made him even more impactful on both ends of the floor. And initially that impact was felt mostly on offense because it allows him to have more space and use more of his perimeter skill, but now defensively as well. The impact is just out of control. He's at the rim, he's in passing lanes, his length clearly bothers even the most veteran of NBA players. Guys are not accustomed to the length and the ability to protect the rim that he has, even in comparison to the other elite rim protectors in the NBA. And before the season, I expected a crazy defensive impact from Wemby just because of his length, but now his offense is really starting to come together as well. He's shooting nearly 40% from 3 in February, combined with the crazy defensive impact that he's having as well. This is just an out of control player right now. And even for a Spurs team that quite frankly just isn't very good, he still manages to impress every single night. And it's rare for a player to show up with the amount of hype that Wemby did. I'd argue that he was probably the most hyped up player in the history of the league. Maybe it's just him and LeBron. And just deliver, just show up and do exactly what everybody hoped that he would do, be exactly what everybody hoped that he would be the savior of a franchise, have incredible impact on both ends of the floor, say all the right things off the floor, do all the right things on the floor. This is just not supposed to happen. Now, I will say in his move to the 5, there are some moments for Wemby where you can tell he doesn't want to be a center. He doesn't want to do the big man stuff, maybe in the way that you would want him to. He has a little bit of that like Kevin Durant kind of vibe where it's like, I know in Kevin Durant's case, I'm almost 7 feet tall, and in Wemby's case, he's 7'5". It's like, I'm aware of that, but like, I'm not a big, I am a perimeter player. I'm a basketball player. Do not try and just make me be at the 5. And you can tell that he pushes back a little bit on just trying to be the big guy out there. But in almost every single way, he has actually somehow managed to exceed expectations in one of the most hyped up rookie seasons that we have ever seen. And for San Antonio moving forward, when you have a player like this, that you can really not even compare throughout the history of the league, guys that have shown up and done what Wemby has done, 2 things start to happen. One, you start to really want to put an awesome team around him quicker than maybe you would otherwise. You're looking at free agency options with a ton of cap space. You're looking at trade options to bring in a true, legitimate starting caliber point guard. You're looking at other options within the roster in terms of who are the keepers. We know that we like Devin Vassell. Who else are we keeping on this roster? You start to look at that way more aggressively than you normally would. And then also the other thing that happens, this has happened with Luka, this has happened with a handful of other guys. Things happen quicker than you would expect them to when you have truly, potential all-time great caliber guys on your roster, which Wemby might be and Luka seems to be as well. Playoff runs, playoff performances, higher seeds, getting to the conference finals, potentially getting to the finals the way that it did for LeBron back in the day. Those kinds of things happen earlier than you expect them to when you have these kinds of players. And as a franchise, it's on you to be prepared for when those kinds of things happen. And I would not be surprised. The Spurs are not going to be good this year, but I would not be surprised if we go into next season where we're talking about San Antonio as a possible playoff team. And I know that that sounds absurd because of how far away they seem from that right now in terms of the rest of the roster around Wemby, but I'm telling you, the impact that he's having on a night-to-night basis is an all-NBA level of impact already as a rookie. And he's not even playing a ton of minutes. Can you imagine not only the statistical output, but the overall impact that a 35, 38-minute Victor Wembanyama game would have? Now, time will tell if he's physically capable of that, if the Spurs are going to trust him with that, if they're going to continue to use him the way that they have as a rookie, which obviously has worked out incredibly well. But still, could you just imagine if theoretically he was able to play 35, 36 minutes a game, or maybe even a playoff game, even more than that? The impact that he has on the floor, having that for even an extra 5-6 minutes a game would be tremendous. And if you continue to improve the roster around him as well, I'm telling you, San Antonio could be much, much better next year than we ever expect them to be, given how poor the rest of the roster is, for the most part, around Wemby. And I think the bottom line here is Wemby needs to be appreciated in a way that is almost hard to do. It's almost hard to quantify just how impressive he's been as a rookie, because you have all the expectations on this guy, and then the statistical output is incredible, but you don't want to talk about him too much because you don't want to feel like you're overhyping him. I'm not overhyping Victor Wembanyama. He is an unbelievable player that does so much in limited minutes at such a young age, and this historic performance is just another indicator of what I expect to be a long, productive, incredible career for Wemby in San Antonio. And given the history of this organization building championship teams, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at a guy within the next couple of seasons that maybe has an MVP, maybe has a nice playoff run in him, and then at that point, a couple of years from now, the league will be Victor Wembanyama. He will continue to grow as an offensive player. He will continue to get stronger and more coordinated, and the defensive impact is already there, as evidenced by an incredible 5x5 performance, and that is only going to improve, and I cannot wait to see what ceiling this guy eventually gets to. And it's funny because the conversation of like, oh, who does the league belong to when LeBron and Steph and KD and these guys leave? Is it going to be Ant Edwards? Is it going to be this or that? Is it going to be Luka's league? All those guys are incredibly talented, but if I had to pick one player right now that I think is the face of the league in 5 seasons, LeBron's gone, KD's gone, Steph is gone, I'm going to pick Wemby.